In one of the wealthiest nations in the world, why are young Americans, specifically those under age 30, some of the most unhappy in the world? For almost 2 decades, it's been widely accepted that you are most happy in your youth between ages 0 and 20. And then, interestingly enough, happiness tends to dwindle or fall a little bit in working age years, especially here in the United States, where the average vacation days are 11 days or less. There is no mandated vacation leave. And in fact, of those 11 days that some people in the United States get, we don't even use all of that. However, we then saw a demarcation or a clear growth in happiness in the United States after around age 50 or 60, both for mental health and happiness as people become content with their lives, and a lot of those individuals move into retirement. However, in this updated study from 2022, we see that the happiness curve in the United States and really across the world has fallen. Most noticeably, as you see here, the early years have fallen significantly, and it's pulled the entire curve down. So not only is life satisfaction falling around the world, it is also falling across every age range. Specific to the United States, the New York Times has ran several studies looking at the mental health of young adults in America, usually referring to individuals between 18 to 25, but definitely under age 30. And why is that? The gap between happiness, or what they describe as flourishing, and I'll give you a definition of flourishing in a minute here, in the United States is widest across the world in developed countries, meaning that for individuals who are between their 18 to 25, they are significantly less happy than individuals between 50 and 80, as you can see here in this chart. So what are some of those primary drivers of negative mental health for young people in the United States, with many of which they can be grouped, but most significantly and consistently at the top is financial concerns or economic concerns? Or looking at the top 5, financial worries, the pressure to achieve, a lack of direction, things falling apart, and a lack in skills or talents, which is probably being amplified as it feels like artificial intelligence or AI is taking over a lot of job opportunities or a lot of work and life opportunities for young Americans. For example, when we look at happiness around the world and happiness specific to the United States, we can almost see two Americas. It's like Gen Z versus baby boomers. Gen Z, who turned age 28 this year, aren't even in the top 10 for happiest countries around the United States, whereas baby boomers and those over age 60 have significantly reported not only more happiness, but increased levels of happiness as they move through age. And around the world, they have consistently ranked in the United States higher or in the top 10, although the United States is falling down this list and doesn't even make the top 10 when you combine the entire population of the United States, again being pulled down by the unhappiness of young Americans. So as I said earlier, I'd give you a definition of what is considered flourishing according to this study analyzed by the New York Times. Well, in the top 3, they look at happiness and life satisfaction, physical and mental health, character and virtue, meaning and purpose. Rounding out the end of the list, to be flourishing, you also have close social relationships and financial stability. Some of this can be explained by a separate study from Harvard University that found that this generation, or those under age 30, typically Gen Z, will have less economic success. For the first time, 50% of this population will have less economic success than their parents. If you were born in 1940, about 90% of individuals will have more or have already achieved greater economic prosperity than their parents. And while you can see this number has been falling over the past few decades, it is now for the first time where most men and women in the United States will do the same or worse than their parents economically. More recently, we can even see this drop off among employed individuals in the United States as we look at this economic or employee confidence survey from the USA Today, especially after the pandemic. Employees were asked how many have a positive outlook for their employment over the next 6 months, and you can see there's a significant drop in that happiness or that confidence, especially since after the pandemic. Let's look at why financial worries might be the top concern of young Americans. First, let's look at the average salary for all Americans in the United States. Shown here is the average and median salary from ages 18 to 75 in the United States. Highlighted in green is the peak working years, with most Americans making their peak salaries between ages 34 and roughly 54. Whereas when we look at census data and narrow that down to just working men in the United States, we get a median range of about $60,000 all the way to an average range of about $85,000. Keep in mind that averages do tend to be pulled higher because of outliers, and I've got another breakdown in my video description if you want to see the difference between median and average salary across the United States and what Americans are making at every age in the United States. When we even narrow that population down further to just looking at average single men, we have a median salary of about $48,000 and an average salary of about $68,000. When we look across all genders and demographics in the United States, married men tend to have the average salary peaking around age 47 at nearly $90,000, with a median salary of $65,000 to a peak salary of around $86,000 on average. So why does that matter? A recent study from Smart Asset this week found that to find happiness or to live comfortably in the United States based on a 50-30-20 budget, it is significantly higher than those salaries, whether it's median or average, that we just discussed. That range for a comfortable salary in the United States shown here for West Virginia at the lowest for $80,000 all the way up to over $124,000 for a comfortable living salary based on a 50-30-20 budget. And here's a side-by-side comparison of the average salary that Americans make in the United States versus a comfortable salary according to that study by Smart Asset. Another study from USA Today also looked at what American workers actually make around the United States, with American workers who work at least 30 hours a week making somewhere between $45,000 to $60,000 a year. Another thing to keep in mind about the United States is the high concentration of individuals in major cities in the United States. There's about 3,000 counties in the United States, but only 50, or less than 2%, have a population over 1 million. What does that mean? That means about 140 counties have 50% of the United States population. Or, put another way, 140 counties have a higher population than nearly 2,000 counties in the United States combined. You can see that concentration here, with the largest major cities in the United States being New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, and Houston, with New York having a population of about 9 million, with Houston and Chicago, with Houston allegedly forecasted to pass Chicago in 2037, but currently at the fourth spot at 2.4 million. Why does that matter? Because it is significantly more expensive to find homes, housing, work, and afford the cost of living in these major cities. As you can see here, how much that income grows just to find, by according to this study, the minimum salary for happiness in these major cities around the United States. In fact, most studies recommend for cost of living in major cities in the United States to maintain that 50-30-20 budget, you cannot make less than six figures in many of those cities and still afford the local cost of living. The story gets a little bit better when we look at married or households around the United States, which is not also or doesn't always include married couples in those households, and is in fact significantly shrink as far as married households go, with the median household income in the United States being $80,000 and the average household income in the United States being $114,000. On the right is a breakdown of median household in the United States according to the U.S. Census data based on the reporting individual for age of head of house. Finally, let's look again at why financial worries might be a top concern of Americans, but especially young Americans in the United States as of 2025. Well, Investopedia estimates that in totality, the American dream will run you about $4 million. However, let's narrow that down to three areas that most Americans agree still defines the American dream. That's marriage, home, and children, not necessarily in that order. Let's look at what that looks like for cost of living and finances in the United States as of 2025. First, the state of marriage in the United States is going through a bit of an upheaval, if you will, with Americans marrying later and later in life, around age 30 for men on average and age 28 for women, if they marry at all. Additionally, marriage rates are at a record low, have reached a record low in the United States at 2020, also having come down. But a bit of good news, divorce rates are also down in the United States. Here's a look at those marriage rates for every state in the United States. And importantly, a new record high, more individuals in the United States than ever have reached age 40, or about 25%, having never said I do or having never married. In 1980, just 2 generations ago, 94% of individuals in the United States would have been married by age 40. Now let's look at housing in the United States. Here's a breakdown of the typical home buyer in the United States in 2025. On average, household income for these buyers is around $98,000, and they tend to be in their late 30s, on average 38 years old for the first-time home buyer, also a new record high. Why are many home buyers waiting so much longer or later in life to buy a home? Well, it's also because of the decrease in home costs, with the median home about $400,000 as of the date of this video. A recent analysis by NBC News found that in almost half of the United States, first-time home buyers have a household income over 6 figures, and about 25, with some estimates as high as 40% of those first-time home buyers are actually investors, especially for single-family units, not just individuals. So individuals are competing for higher housing prices with older individuals as well as against investors, which has really tightened the market or the housing market for first-time home buyers. Most recommendations are that your total in-home costs, including mortgage and insurance, not exceed 30% of your income. And because housing costs are over $400,000 in many states around the United States, that means, according to this study from Bankrate, you would need a household income over 6 figures and $117,000 on average. A recent analysis from Redfin even estimates that in just 5 years, the median home price will be over $600,000, which means you'll need an average household income of $190,000, or almost a 144% increase from what individuals are actually making today for household income. And yes, while this can be fixed, why are so many young Americans sad in one of the wealthiest nations around the world? Because this is how they currently see their future. No home, no retirement, no kids.